edition. But does anybody know what year the city of Vancouver was founded?
Incorporated or founded?
No. Like officially founded the city of Vancouver. 1886, right? So 125 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Before that, there was some logging. Like that's what mainly attracted settlers to this area. I think the first European to arrive was a Spanish explorer in 1791, I think, and then 1 year later, George Vancouver, and then settlements began in the downtown area. A settlement called Granville in the 1870s. Huh. So that's really not a long time ago when you think about it, and kind of an interesting thing to think about as we walk into the older parts of the forest today is to compare the age of these trees, which are going to be up to 1,350 years at least, some of the trees we'll see today, and the relative speed at which it is all being depleted, and there's just these little periphery pockets of old growth left. It's kind of interesting. Of course, before the Europeans arrived, this area was inhabited by the Coast Salish First Nation. They were believed, according to what I've read, to have settled the area about 500 BC. So they lived here for 2,500 years. They used the forest as a primary resource along with the ocean. Every single plant had a specific purpose and use, everything from medicine to food to transportation, tools, building materials, clothing, etc. And they had a tremendous value for the forest. They generally held a view that everything on Earth was interconnected. Sort of the tree is like me, I'm like the tree. Interestingly, the theory of evolution supports that. Interesting as a biology student to see that. Anyway, we'll continue up.
Hi Russ, so
yeah.
It was logged here in like 1910?
Yeah.
So these are like 100 years old exactly, that's how...
I think what happened with this forest, the story is, so this area would have been logged in 1910 approximately, and then there was a big fire in 1916. And I think that this forest probably regenerated following that fire, because I see mostly western red cedars. Western red cedars they're a shade tolerant species, so they develop slowly in a forest, but they also establish well after fires. Yeah.
So it would have been totally just completely eradicated everything by the fire.
It seems like it, and if you look at the old stumps we see along the way, you'll see the charred remains. You'll see lots of charcoal in them. Yeah.
Cool.
Anyway, let's continue. A forest like this with big trees back in the day with primitive tools, nothing more than an axe and a crosscut saw, would have taken ages to cut down and transport the wood back to the water. It's not like it is today. And you can see these notches that are cut. These were cut using an axe by the lumbermen. So they'd cut a notch into this, and then they'd take their springboard, which is essentially a plank that's wide enough to stand on, usually has a metal tip. They'd insert it into the springboard notch, kind of like that, and then this would give them a solid purchase to stand on. The goal of this was to get above the swell of the bottom of the tree, because they're using a saw, not a chainsaw, there's a considerable advantage to get above the bottom swell of the tree. So they'd stand up here, get out their crosscut saw, and cut it down. And that's as far as my demonstration goes, because I don't actually have a crosscut saw.
And it's already done.
We'd be here for a while.
And then 2 people, right?
Yeah.
On the other side?
2 people,
yeah.
Exactly. So there'd be 1 guy on this side, 1 guy on that side. And a tree like this would take probably several hours to half a day to cut down. Yeah. And then you're still left with the task of hauling the log down to the ocean where you can float it by boat. Wow. So a forest like this would have taken months, if not years, to cut. And this was like really the backbone of the economy of Vancouver. So a lot of people were doing this, and as time went on, they got better and better at it. They got more efficient. So I talked about that railroad that was put in 1910. That was a big improvement from the skid roads they'd use, which would be just a slippery log road going down, and then they'd haul it down using manpower and ox power. And then the railway made it quite a bit easier. Then they made an incline railway, which was being pulled by a winch at the top, so just a long funicular type railway. So they got more efficient. Then in the 1950s, the chainsaw was invented, and in the 1960s, the chainsaw became common in the woods. A tree like this would then be not a whole lot of work to cut down for one man. Cut it down, load it on a truck, and take it out to the port. Not a problem. So the tendency that's gone on is from this slow style of logging, which is, you know, the belief back in the day was that by the time we cut down all the trees, the big ones will have grown back where we first cut them. Now that's far from the case. Now another story that we see before us, even bigger than this. Does anybody have any idea what I'm talking about? Something in this forest that's very dramatic around us.
That rock?
Yeah, right on. What is it?
Some smart people next to me said it was a glacier that dropped off.
A glacier erratic, right. So it's called an erratic because, well, it's looking pretty erratic. It was a rock that was transported at the end of the last ice age, or deposited at the end of the last ice age, about 11,000 years ago. And yes, it does look quite erratic. It's probably a different rock composition a little bit than what's below it. And why else would a big rock be there, right? So 11,000 years ago, this was all 1 kilometer to 2 kilometers thick ice right here. When that came in, it effectively extinguished all the forest biodiversity in BC. You know, it was inhospitable completely for, well, for many tens of thousands of years as different ice ages advanced and retreated. Over time, the species that we see today have disseminated back from refugias where they survived. So this was in California, possibly also on the far west coast, like the Brooks Peninsula on Vancouver Island and Haida Gwaii. And then they've come back in here. So that's an interesting thing that we should keep in mind as we continue the hike. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, why with how great of the size that tree is and it decomposing, why haven't trees grown out of it?
You mean like as a nurse log?
Yeah.
Well, you'll probably see some that have grown out of it. I mean, the trees that I'm seeing around us are almost all western red cedars. Oh, there's some hemlock. So hemlock are the ones that you'll probably see growing on it as a nurse log. Like this will make a nice habitat for western hemlock seedlings to grow because they really love growing on organic matter. A lot of trees won't, like a cedar. You won't usually see growing on a nurse log. Sometimes you will.
Aren't the nurse logs usually horizontal? Like
nurse log is just any woody debris that's become habitat for other plants. Yeah. I mean, I can see it looks like some huckleberries growing on the top.
Yeah.
And as we get towards the older forest, we'll see lots of nurse logs with lots of biodiversity growing on them.
There's one down there. Small.
Yep. Yep.
It's unclear.